LRBT2 method argument, question 9. So we are trying to describe the technique used in the passage. And we can see that, we've got an argument and the argument is being weakened. And so this is why, we have different perspectives, but I highly recommend if you see that the question is uber long, maybe read that first and see what in the world are we going to do with this. So our argument is being weakened, and the claim is that aggressiveness is innate to human beings. So we're trying to figure out how are they weakening this? They ask about the technique used. So one researcher writes, human beings are innately aggressive. That's just one researcher having an opinion, and it's presented as a fact. They wrote that opinion, so that's a fact. As evidence, the researcher recites the prevalence of warfare in history and then discounts any current disinclination to fight. So they're just saying, okay, here's what they wrote. That's their claim. The claim is that human beings are innately aggressive. That's the claim that is being posed, and that's still a fact because it was written. And then they talk about how that written claim is supported. So this is all just background information helping us to understand what is the researcher saying. And then they cite this piece. The most peaceable peoples of today were often ravagers of yesteryear. That's such a word, yesteryear. I want that to be a clothing brand. Okay. The most peaceful peoples were often ravagers of yesteryear. So meaning that the people who are peaceful today often were absolutely rambunctious and violent, yesterday or, in the past. And they will probably fight again in the future. So just because people are peaceful today, it doesn't mean they're going to stay peaceful forever. But if some peoples are peaceable now, then aggression itself cannot be coded in our genes, only the potential for it. I don't know what we're doing talking about genes here now. We're talking about history, I thought, but whatever. If innate only means possible or even likely in certain environments, then everything we do is innate and the word has no meaning. That's a nihilist view. All right, so our author is basically commenting on this researcher. And, based off the question, we know that our author is weakening the argument. And so let's kind of look for our author's conclusion. Um, I love this. But if some peoples are peaceful now, then aggression itself cannot be coded in our genes. So they're saying that only the potential for it, and that innate only means possible or even likely. Everything we do is innate, and the word has no meaning. They're talking about the implications of this. That's their framework. That's their principle. So they haven't really come out and stated their main point and their main conclusion, but we know that they're disagreeing. The researcher says that human beings are innately aggressive. So if we're fighting so hard against it, our author probably thinks that human beings are not innately aggressive because we can't code this in our genes. And innate only means possible, not certain, not certain. Okay. So we're going to look at our answer choices, evaluate them real slow and see what comes up. So how is our author weakening this argument? From the researcher. A, the accuracy of the historical data cited in the argument for innate aggressiveness is called into question. We're not talking about the historical data. We're not talking about, this is not reasonable. It's questionable. It came from a weird source. We're not doing any of that. B, the force of the concept of innateness used in the argument for innate aggressiveness is called into question. So the force of the concept, meaning how strong is it? This person is saying innate only means possible, meaning everything we do is innate because it's possible. So they're indicating that our researcher, human beings are innately aggressive. They say, okay, people will always go and probably will fight again. They're saying it's super, super likely. But our author is saying, it just means it can happen. It's likely in certain environments. Like you're getting way too far with this innate thing, dude. So they're calling into question, like, how strong is this innate? So the force of the concept, the strength of this concept of innateness. How effective is it? How much does it really push us to do things? So B is looking like a really nice answer. C, an attempt is made to undermine the argument for innate aggressiveness by arguing that there are no genetically based traits. Okay, so all we're saying is that aggression itself cannot be coded. We're not saying that there are no genetically based traits. We're not necessarily trying to undermine the argument by arguing this piece about the genetics. However, there is an attempt to undermine the argument in general. But just because half the answer is true does not mean we can pick it. D, an attempt is made to undermine the argument for innate aggressiveness. Look, same wording from above. By suggesting that it appeals to emotional considerations rather than to reason. I don't know about you, but I don't see any emotions. So I'm saying no. If we were saying that there were emotional considerations to appeals, our author would be saying something closer to, they didn't present any good reasoning. They are just, opening themselves up to, whatever everybody wants, and it's like creating very flowery arguments. Like our author would have to come out and say that. I've actually never seen that on an LSAT question before, but emotional appeals, we can spot those, or appeals to authority, appeals to something where they don't we can find appeals where they're not referring to actual logic and reasoning. They're not addressing the conclusion or the argument provided. They're just going based off of something else. E, an attempt is made to undermine the current argument for innate aggressiveness. Third time's the charm, I suppose, by arguing that all peoples are peaceable. Now, our author doesn't actually argue that all peoples are peaceable. They just say if some peoples are peaceful now, like in the case that they are, doesn't mean they are. That's what's tricky. So we would go with B as our best answer here for this question.